The envelope was lying on the table among the other correspondence, white with the blue Fairview National Bank logo on it. I didn't notice it right away, busy sorting through my utility bills. Only after finishing my second cup of coffee did I pick up the envelope and twirl it around in my hands. Strange. I hadn't done any business with Fairview National. Opening the letter, I ran my eyes over the first few lines and felt a chill run down my spine. Dear Mrs. Tolliver, you are reminded of your late monthly mortgage payment. What followed was an amount that made me dizzy, $7,243.80. What the hell is this? I muttered as I continued to read. The letter said that I was behind on my second monthly payment on a $950,000 mortgage loan made in March. If I didn't pay the arrears within 2 weeks, the bank would be forced to begin foreclosure proceedings. My first thought was to call the bank and explain that there had been a mistake. I had never taken out a loan for such an astronomical amount. My little house on Elm Street, purchased with Harold 32 years ago, had long since been paid off. Why would I, a 67-year-old widow, take out a new loan? I dialed the Fairview National number listed in the letter, and after a long wait on the line, I finally heard the operator's voice. Hi, this is Winifred Tolliver. I received a letter about a late payment on a loan, but there's some mistake. I didn't take out any loan from your bank. Just a moment, Mrs. Tolliver. I'll check the information, the girl replied politely. While she studied the data, I looked out of the kitchen window at my small but well-kept garden. Harold had died 10 years ago, and since then I had lived alone in the house, gradually adjusting to the life of a widow. 43 years together and then nothing. No, not quite empty. I had children, Harper and Lennox, but they'd long since gone on with their own lives, not often thinking of their mother. Mrs. Tolliver? The operator's voice brought me back to reality. According to our records, on March 14th of this year, you actually took out a mortgage loan in the amount of $950,000 for a period of 30 years. The loan was for the purchase of real estate at Lakeview Terrace, number 27 in Concord. But that's impossible, I exclaimed. I've never signed any paperwork for a loan, especially not for that amount of money. We have all the documentation we need, Mrs. Tolliver, including your signature on the loan agreement, copies of your passport, social security numbers, and tax returns for the last 3 years. I felt my mouth go dry. Someone had used my information to apply for a loan for a colossal amount of money. It's fraud, I said firmly. Someone had stolen my data. In that case, you should go to the police, Mrs. Tolliver, and you should come to our head office with identification for a hearing. But I must warn you that until the situation is cleared up, the bank will hold you responsible for the loan payments. After the call, I sat down at my desk, feeling my hands shaking. Who could have done such a thing? Who had access to my documents? Suddenly, the phone rang. My daughter's name popped up on the screen. Mom, did you remember it's Zoe's birthday today? Harper began without greeting. We're expecting you at 3 o'clock. And please don't wear that awful green sweater. This is a restaurant, not your vegetable garden. Zoe, my granddaughter, was turning 12. Of course, I remembered that and had already prepared a gift, a silver bracelet with a star pendant. I remember, Harper, I said, but I have a serious problem. I got a letter from the bank. Mom, don't start that again, I interrupted her with ill-concealed irritation. If you get another credit card advertisement, just throw it away. How many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to open all these letters? Harper, it's not about the commercials. Someone put almost $1 million worth of credit in my name. There was a pause on the phone. What is this nonsense, Mom? Harper finally said with a nervous chuckle. Who would give a pensioner such a loan? You're confusing things. I'm not confused, I objected. I have a letter from the bank. It says in black and white about a loan for $950,000 issued in my name, and supposedly with my signature on it. Mom, your blood pressure must be skyrocketing again. Harper's voice had a sweet, caring quality that always meant the utmost irritation. Are you sure you took your pills today? Stop talking to me like I'm an old woman out of my mind. I rarely raised my voice, but I couldn't help it now. I'm sane and I know exactly what's going on. Someone stole my information and took out a loan, and I'm going to report it to the police. The police? Oh my God, Mom, are you trying to embarrass us for the whole town? Harper sounded panicked. Look, I'll come over after work. I'll look at this letter and we'll figure it out. But for God's sake, don't make any calls. Okay, I agreed, feeling a little perplexed by this reaction. Come by after work. Hanging up the phone, I thought. My daughter's reaction seemed strange to me. Had she gotten too anxious over the threat of going to the police? Harper was usually the first person to advise me to not make a fuss about nothing. To distract myself from my anxious thoughts, I decided to get ready for my granddaughter's party. I took out of my closet a dark blue dress, which I wore only on special occasions, and began to iron it. My thoughts kept returning to the mysterious loan. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was at the Golden Lily restaurant, a pretentious establishment with exorbitant prices and tiny portions. Lennox, my son, was already there with his wife Deirdre and their teenage children, 15-year-old Nolan and 14-year-old Marilyn. Lennox worked as a customs broker and always emphasized his status with expensive watches and suits. Mom, you didn't comb your hair properly again, he said instead of greeting me as I approached the table. Your hair is sticking out over your left ear. Hello, Lennox. I ignored his remark. Hello, Deirdre. Hi, guys. The teens mumbled something in response, still on their phones. Deirdre nodded with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Where's Harper? I asked, sitting down in the offered chair. Delayed at work, Lennox replied. Some problems with the Ward family. You know how responsible she is for her duties as an inspector. Harper worked in social services, dealing with dysfunctional families. She always said her job was to rescue children from incompetent parents. Sometimes I thought that phrase was a rebuke to me, too. We'd been sitting at the table for half an hour when Harper finally showed up with her husband Frank and the birthday girl Zoe. My granddaughter, a tall girl with brown hair for her age, was wearing an expensive dress that made her look like a miniature copy of her mother. Grandma, you've come! Zoe exclaimed with feigned surprise, as if my presence at her birthday party was something unusual. Of course I did, dear. I would never have missed your birthday. I handed her a neatly wrapped box with a bracelet. Happy birthday! Zoe took the gift without much enthusiasm and set it aside without even unwrapping it. Thank you, she mumbled, and then turned to her cousin Marilyn to show her something on her phone. Mom, what kind of story did you make up about the loan? Harper whispered to me, leaning in close to my ear while the others were busy studying the menu. I didn't make anything up, I answered just as quietly. I have a letter from the bank. For God's sake, don't talk about it in front of everyone. Harper straightened up and said loudly, Mom, do you want salad or soup? Lunch passed in a tense atmosphere. Lennox and Harper discussed some general business, occasionally turning to me with condescending questions like, Do you still remember Uncle Robert? Or, Mom, are you sure you're doing okay alone in this big house? My house was far from big. Just 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. But the kids periodically hinted that I should have moved to a smaller place. I suspected they just wanted to sell the house and split the money. After lunch, as Zoe opened presents, I noticed Harper and Lennox exchange meaningful glances as my granddaughter carelessly set aside a silver bracelet. Must be old-fashioned, Harper muttered so I could hear. I wanted to say it was a replica of my grandmother's bracelet that she'd worn all her life, but I kept silent. What was the point of explaining the value of things to people to whom only price mattered? When the party was over, Harper said she'd stop by my house in an hour. I took the bus home, feeling strangely anxious. Something about my daughter's behavior made me uneasy. At home, I reread the letter from the bank one more time. The address of the property purchased with the loan money looked familiar. Lakeview Terrace was a new upscale lakeside neighborhood that was frequently featured in the local paper. Had someone stolen my information to buy a house there? While waiting for Harper, I turned on the computer, a gift from Lennox last Christmas. To keep you up to date, Mom. I wasn't very good with computers, but I had the basic skills. I opened a search engine and typed in the address, Lakeview Terrace, 27 Concord. Photos of a luxurious 2-story house with panoramic windows and a view of the lake appeared on the screen. The value of such a property really could have been about $1 million. I scrolled down the page and froze when I saw the information about a recent sale. The house had been sold in March of this year, and the date of the transaction coincided with the date the loan was processed. I heard the sound of a car pulling up and looked out the window. Harper had parked her brand new SUV in front of the house. I noticed the car was new too. She had previously owned a mid-sized sedan. When my daughter entered the house, I immediately noticed her nervousness. She avoided looking me in the eye and fixed her hair too often, a gesture that always gave away her excitement. "Where is that letter, Mother?" she asked without taking off her coat. I silently handed her the envelope. Harper ran her eyes over the text quickly, and I saw her turn pale. "It's some kind of mistake," she said uncertainly. "Or a scam. Someone used your data." "That's exactly what I told you on the phone this morning," I said. "And I was going to report it to the police." "No, no, 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 no," Harper said hurriedly. "I'll take care of it myself. I have a friend at Fairview National who can help me sort it out." "I found out something, too," I said calmly. "The address in the letter is a new house on Lakeview Terrace. It's a very nice house, according to the pictures on the internet. 2 stories, overlooking the lake." Harper looked up sharply. "You looked on the internet?" "Yes," I nodded. "And I also noticed that you have a new car. I don't remember you saying you were planning on changing it." "Mom, what are you trying to say?" Harper's voice became hard. "Nothing yet," I shrugged. "Just an observation." Harper clutched her purse nervously. "Look, I told you I'll deal with that stupid letter. You have nothing to worry about." "I think I do," I countered. "Someone took out a loan in my name, used my documents, forged my signature. And if I don't pay that loan, I'm going to lose the house." "No one's taking your house away from you," Harper exclaimed with sudden fury. "Damn it, Mom. Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? I told you I'd solve the problem." She was almost shouting, and I could see the red blotches on her neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. There was only one thing that could cause such a reaction. Harper knew a lot more about the loan than she was saying. "It's you," I said quietly, looking her straight in the eye. "You took out the loan in my name." My daughter looked away. "Don't be silly, Mom. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I answered. "But I'm going to find out." Harper snatched the letter out of my hands. "I'm taking this. And please don't do anything stupid. Don't call the bank. Don't go to the police. I'll take care of it." She ran out of the house, slamming the door loudly. I was left standing in the middle of the living room, feeling strangely devastated. My own daughter had stolen my information to buy a $1 million house, a house she hadn't even told me about. I slowly walked over to my computer and reopened the page with pictures of the house on Lakeview Terrace, a luxurious building with huge windows and a terrace overlooking the lake, a place I'd never been invited to. In my inbox, I noticed an unread message from the bank. When I opened it, I saw an electronic copy of the loan agreement sent to my address when the deal was finalized. In the borrower's signature column was a forgery of my signature, so crudely done that it was strange how the bank could not have noticed it. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the cold rage building inside. For years, my children had treated me like a burden, tolerated my presence at family events with barely concealed irritation, talked to me like I was retarded. And now Harper had crossed the final line. She hadn't just stolen my data, she'd jeopardized the only thing I had left. My home, my independence, my dignity. I pulled my notebook out of my desk drawer and started flipping through it, looking for the right number. I needed a lawyer, but not the kind Lennox would recommend. I needed someone who would take my side against my own children. Attorney Rowan Jett's office was in an old brick building in the business section of Concord. I found her contacts in the city directory, where she modestly advertised herself as a specialist in elder law defense and financial abuse. Exactly what I needed. I called first thing in the morning, and the secretary, to my surprise, made an appointment for the same day, at 14 hours and 30 minutes. Apparently, the lawyer's schedule wasn't too tight. Getting off the bus, I stood in front of the entrance for a while, gathering my wits. The word lawyer had always sounded intimidating to me. I'd only had to go to a lawyer twice in my life, when Harold and I had bought a house and when we'd drawn up his will. In both cases, it was Harold's acquaintances, and he handled all the negotiations himself. "I can handle it," I said to myself and pushed open the heavy door. The reception area was small but cozy. Behind the desk sat a young woman with a short haircut and thick-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Tolliver?" she asked when she saw me. "Mrs. Jett is expecting you. Please come in." The lawyer's office looked unexpected. Instead of a stiff, formal interior, I saw a bright room with large windows and potted plants. Behind a wide desk sat a woman in her 60s with close-cropped gray hair and a bright blue suit. "Hello, Mrs. Tolliver." She stood up and extended her hand to me. "Rowan Jett, please have a seat." Her handshake was firm, like someone accustomed to showing confidence. I sat down in the chair she offered me. "Tell me what brings you to me," Rowan said, pulling out a notebook. I took a deep breath and started with the letter from the bank. I told her about the call to the bank, Harper's reaction, how I'd found the pictures of the house on the internet, and the last conversation I'd had with my daughter. My voice was shaky, but I tried to keep it to the point without getting emotional. Rowan listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen thoughtfully on the table. "What you've described, Mrs. Tolliver, is a classic case of identity theft, aggravated by the fact that the perpetrator is a family member. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, especially in the elderly." "Do you think my daughter really did it?" I asked, still hoping for some other explanation. "What do you think?" Rowan looked at me carefully. I sighed. "I think I do. The new car, the nervousness at talking about the loan, trying to keep me quiet. But I find it hard to believe Harper could do that. She's always been ambitious and a little arrogant, but to go on a crime?" "People change," Rowan said, "and not always for the better. Tell me, has your daughter shown signs of, shall we say, disrespect for your personal and financial independence?" I wondered. There have been many instances over the years when my children have tried to control my decisions, especially those related to money. After Harold, my husband, died, Lennox insisted that I give him power of attorney to manage my accounts, I said. He claimed it would be safer, but I refused. It caused quite a scandal. He even threatened to have me declared incompetent if I continued to be stubborn. "And the real estate? Was there talk of selling your house?" "All the time," I nodded. "Especially in the last 2 years. Harper says it's too big for me alone, that I can't keep it up. And Lennox is calculating how much I can get for selling it. They've even found me a nice little apartment in a retirement home." Rowan made a note in her notebook. "Do you have a will? Who gets your estate?" "Harper and Lennox equally," I said. "That's what Harold and I decided years ago. Although I admit I've been thinking about changing it lately. Leave the money to the grandchildren instead of the children." "I see," Rowan nodded. "Now let's get back to our case. We have a couple of options. The first is to go to the police and report fraud. That's the most drastic course of action, and it could lead to criminal prosecution of your daughter." I flinched at those words. Harper is a criminal? My daughter in jail? It seemed absurd. "Are there other options?" I asked quietly. "The second option is a civil suit," Rowan continued. "We could sue your daughter and have the loan agreement voided as fraudulent. It's less drastic than a criminal case, but it would still result in a public scandal." "And the third option?" I nervously clutched my purse. "Try to resolve the matter amicably," Rowan shrugged. "I could write a letter on your behalf, laying out the facts and demanding that your daughter take over the loan or repay it immediately. The threat of criminal prosecution might force her to act." I remained silent, trying to digest the information. All the options seemed horrible, but even more horrible was the thought of my own daughter putting me in this position. "What would happen if I just did nothing?" I finally asked. "If I just ignore this loan?" Rowan shook her head. "Then the bank will start foreclosure proceedings. First they'll charge late fees, then they'll turn it over to the debt collectors. Eventually they could sue you and get the right to enforce foreclosure, including seizure of your property. That is, your house." "But that's not fair," I exclaimed. "I didn't sign anything." "Justice and the law aren't always the same thing, Mrs. Tolliver," Rowan said softly. "To prove that you didn't take the loan, we'd have to prove fraud, and that means naming the fraudster." I closed my eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. For as long as I could remember, Harper had always been a difficult child, stubborn, sharp, ambitious, not childishly calculating. She rarely made friends at school, but she always got the best grades. She often clashed with her brother, but she could manipulate him. Harold thought that she would make a great lawyer or politician. Our girl has a steely character, he said with pride. But there was something else about Harper. Beneath the mask of self-confidence lurked a painful need for recognition, for confirmation of her worth. I noticed it in the smallest things, how she bragged about new things, how desperate she was to impress others, how painfully she reacted to any criticism. I remember when she was 15, she came home in tears because she didn't get the lead role in the school play. "That part was mine, mine!" she screamed, locking herself in her room. And the next day we learned that the girl who had gotten the part had been in an accident. Someone had pushed her on the stairs and she had broken her arm. Harper got the part. Harold and I never discussed the incident, but I could see the worry in his eyes. As she became an adult, Harper didn't change. She didn't marry Frank for love, but because he came from a well-connected, respectable family. She chose to work in social services not out of compassion for troubled families, but because it gave her power over others. And I knew she was always jealous of those who lived in upscale neighborhoods, drove expensive cars, vacationed in exotic countries. "Mrs. Tolliver?" Rowan's voice brought me back to reality. "Do you need some time to think?" "Yes, I suppose I do," I nodded. "It's too big a decision to make right away." "I understand." Rowan handed me a business card. "Call me when you've decided how to proceed. But don't take too long. Time is working against us." I got up to leave, but stopped at the door. "Ms. Jett, what would you do if you were me?" Rowan hesitated. "I can't give such advice, Mrs. Tolliver. Each person must decide for himself what is more important to him, family ties or justice. And if there is no choice," I asked quietly, "if family ties are already broken?" "Then there is only justice," Rowan replied simply, "and self-respect." I left the office with a heavy heart. It was drizzling outside, and I opened the umbrella I always carried with me, an old habit my children made fun of. "Grandma the Weatherman," Zoe called me. "Mom, there are weather apps now," Harper sighed. Walking slowly to the bus stop, I thought about Rowan's words. Family ties are justice, but aren't true family ties based on mutual respect? Can there be a real family where some members cheat and take advantage of others? The bus was late, and I sat down on a bench. People hurried past, sheltering from the rain, indifferent to other people's problems. And my mind was spinning with memories. Here was Harper, a little girl with pigtails, running toward me with a drawing. "Mommy, look, it's you!" In the drawing is the angular figure of a woman with a huge smile. Here she is, a teenager, rolling her eyes as I try to hug her in front of the school. "Mom, you're embarrassing me." Here she is, a college graduate, proudly showing off her diploma. And I see in her eyes, "Look, I've accomplished everything on my own." Although that's not true. Harold and I worked double shifts to pay for her education. And then everything changed. After Zoe was born, Harper became even more distant. Her infrequent visits became a formality. Her conversations became an enumeration of my shortcomings. "Mom, you should watch your appearance." "Mom, your house looks old-fashioned." "Mom, you talk about the past too much." When Harold died, Harper organized the funeral without asking my opinion on anything. Picked out a casket, flowers, even a dress for me. "You're in no position to make decisions right now, Mom," she said in a tone that tolerated no objection. And after the funeral, she and Lennox started sharing Harold's things as if I didn't exist. His stamp collection, which he'd collected all his life, Lennox had taken for himself without even asking me. "It'll just gather dust at your place, Mom." I became a burden to them, a problem to be solved, an old woman who could only be expected to cause trouble. They stopped seeing me as a person. They probably never did. The bus pulled up and I walked up the steps, struggling to hold my wet umbrella. A young woman gave me a seat, and I nodded gratefully. A small gesture of courtesy from a stranger, more than I'd received from my own children in recent years. At home, the first thing I did was pull out my phone and dial the number of the only person I could trust, Audrey Flint, a friend of mine from my days at the post office. Audrey was 5 years older than me, but she had more energy than people half her age. When she was widowed almost at the same time as me, she didn't get depressed but did volunteer work at an animal shelter and even started learning Spanish for general development. Winnie, she answered after the third ring. Is something wrong? You don't usually call in the middle of the day. I briefly told her about the loan situation and the visit to the lawyer. What a snake! Audrey exclaimed when I was done. After all you and Harold have done for her, Winnie, you should sue her. No, the police. Make her answer to the full extent of the law. I don't know, Audrey. I sighed. She's my daughter. How can I send her to jail? How can she steal from her own mother? Audrey countered. Winnie, listen to me. I know you love your children. All mothers love their children, even the most ungrateful ones. But sometimes love means letting them face the consequences of their actions. If Harper gets away with this scam, what will she pull next time? Her words made sense, but I still had a hard time accepting the thought of filing against my own daughter. I'll think about it, I said. I need some time. Just not too much, Audrey warned. Those bankers won't wait forever. And remember, I'm on your side, whatever you decide. After talking to Audrey, I felt a little better. At least there was one person in the world who supported me unconditionally. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain intensify into a torrential downpour. The drops drummed on the glass, creating a soothing rhythm. My thoughts were slowly becoming clearer. What would Harold say if he were in this situation? My husband was a kind man, but with firm principles. Justice must be done, he often said. And also, you can't let others wipe their feet on you, even if those others are your own family. Perhaps I let my children disrespect me for too long. Perhaps it was my gentleness and accommodating nature that led Harper to take this step. She knew I'd rather keep quiet than make a scene. But not this time. Stop being the doormat that people wipe their feet on. No more being the invisible one whose opinion can be ignored. No more being the old, out-of-touch mom who is tolerated out of politeness. I picked up the phone and dialed Rowan Jett's number. Mrs. Tolliver? She answered in surprise. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I've made up my mind, I said firmly. I want to file a lawsuit against my daughter and a police report for fraud. Are you sure? I could hear the doubt in Rowan's voice. It's a big step. I'm absolutely sure, I replied. If I back out now, I'll never respect myself again, and my children will never respect me again. All right, Rowan said after a pause. Come back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We'll prepare the necessary paperwork. As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I'd made a decision with myself in mind, not what the kids would say. It was frightening and liberating at the same time. The phone rang again. Lennox's name popped up on the screen. Mom, are you out of your mind? He started without greeting. Harper just called me hysterical. She said you're threatening to sue her over some bullshit letter from the bank. It wasn't nothing, Lennox, I said calmly. Your sister made a loan in my name without my knowledge. That's called fraud. Oh, come on, Mom, snorted my son. What a big deal. So she took out a loan. She's paying it off. What do you care? The difference is that it's illegal, I said. And if she stops paying, I'm the one in trouble. She's not going to stop paying. Lennox raised his voice. Damn it, Mom. Have you always been such a pain in the ass? Always making everything so complicated. Did you know? I asked you straight out. Did you know Harper was using my papers? Lennox hesitated for a second. I didn't go into detail. She said you had a deal. We didn't have a deal. I cut him off. She stole my data. And if you knew about it and didn't stop her, then you're an accessory. An accessory? Lennox laughed, but nervously. Mom, you've been watching too many crime shows. No one thinks it's a crime. It's just, a family arrangement. No, Lennox, it is a crime, I said firmly. And I intend to get justice. For God's sake, Mom! There was impatience in my son's voice. What justice? You want to put your own daughter in jail? Disgrace the whole family? What are you thinking? I'm thinking that my children think I'm so insignificant that they don't even see a problem with using my name for their shenanigans, I replied. I think about the fact that you've both treated me like a burden for years. I think it's time for that to stop. Mom, listen. Lennox's voice became sweetly persuasive. Let me come over to your place and we can talk about this. It's just a misunderstanding. Harper didn't mean any harm. She just, wanted a better life for her family. At my expense? Don't be so dramatic, Lennox sighed. No one's going to leave you with debt. Harper's paying her loan and she'll keep paying it. What if she loses her job? She gets sick? Decides she doesn't want to pay anymore? What then? It won't happen, Lennox said confidently. Mom, you have to trust your children. No, Lennox, I replied quietly. It was you who should have respected your mother, but you didn't, and now it was time to pay for it. I hung up without waiting for an answer. My hands were shaking, but I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a helpless old woman, but like a person who could stand up for herself. Of course, Lennox and Harper would press me, use every means to make me back down. They'll threaten, flatter, manipulate. They might even try to paint me as a senile old woman out of her mind, out of control. But now I had Rowan Jett, a lawyer who believed me and was willing to fight for my rights. I had Audrey, a friend who supported me unconditionally. And I had my resolve not to let anyone else, not even my own children, trample on my dignity. The rain outside the window intensified, but I felt like my life was finally starting to clear up. I picked up the phone and dialed Rowan's number again. Miss Jett, I was wondering, if we win the case, what happens to the house Harper bought with the loan money? The bank will probably seize it to pay off the loan, Rowan replied. And if your daughter is found guilty of fraud, she could face a fine and possibly probation. I understand, I said. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up the phone and thought, Harper would lose her dream home, probably get a criminal record, probably hold a grudge against me for the rest of his life. Lennox would probably side with his sister. I could lose not only my children, but my grandchildren. A high price to pay for justice. But the price for silence was even higher, the loss of self-respect. The feeling that I had betrayed myself by letting my children deceive me with impunity. No, I couldn't back down. This was my last chance to show my children that I was not a waste of space, not an old woman out of her mind, but a human being with rights and dignity. And if I had to come into conflict with my own family to do it, so be it. I stared at the rain outside the window and thought about the fact that tomorrow a new chapter of my life would begin. A chapter in which I would be the protagonist, not a minor character in my children's lives. The next morning was overcast, but it had stopped raining. I woke up early before 7 and lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts swirled around my upcoming meeting with Rowan and what was next for me. Doubts began to gnaw at my soul again. Was I doing the right thing? Was it too drastic a step to sue my own daughter? The phone on the bedside table rang. I glanced at the screen, Harper. My finger hovered over the answer button, but I decided not to pick up. Whatever she said now wouldn't change my mind. It would only take away the energy I didn't have left. At 9:30, I was already outside Rowan's office. The receptionist nodded understandingly when she saw me and let me into the office unannounced. Rowan was sitting at her desk, looking over some papers. Good morning, Mrs. Tolliver. She pointed to a chair. I see you're early. That's good. We'll have more time. I sat down, clutching my purse nervously. Miss Jett, I was wondering, do we really have to file a police report? Wouldn't a civil suit suffice? Rowan looked at me carefully. Are you in doubt? Yes, I admitted honestly. I was up all night thinking about it. I think a criminal case is too definitive. There's no turning back after that. Do you want there to be a way back? Rowan asked gently. After what your daughter did? I sighed. I don't know. What she did was awful, but it's still my child. Look. Rowan put the papers aside and leaned across the table to me. Let's do this. We'll gather all the evidence first, and then we'll decide which way to go. We could start with a civil suit and leave the question of criminal prosecution open. How about that? Yes, that would be better. I agreed with relief. Then let's get started. Rowan pulled out a blank notebook. We need to make a chronology of events and collect documents confirming the fraud. Let's start at the beginning. When did you first find out about the loan? We spent the next 2 hours reconstructing what happened. I talked about everything. The letter from the bank, The conversation with the operator, the strange reaction of Harper and Lennox, my daughter's new car, and the house on Lakeview Terrace. So, Rowan summarized, the loan was processed on March 14th. Were you anywhere that day? Maybe traveling or at a doctor's appointment? We need to prove that you couldn't have physically signed the documents at the bank. I thought about it, trying to remember that day. March 14th. Yes, I remember. I had a routine checkup at St. Elizabeth's that day. It took almost the whole day from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. First tests, then a cardiologist consultation, then some other procedures. It was Tuesday, I remember exactly, because I was worried about the results. Great, Rowan made a note. We'll request medical records from the clinic to confirm your presence there when the loan agreement was allegedly signed. It's vital evidence. Will they give us that information? At the request of counsel in preparation for trial, yes. Anything else? Oh, yes, we need samples of your real signature to compare it to the one on the loan agreement. Do you have your signature papers with you? I pulled my passport and driver's license out of my purse. Just these. The rest are at home. That's enough for starters, Rowan nodded. I'll make copies. Later we'll need an official handwriting examination, but that's for the trial. She left the office with my paperwork, and I remained seated, looking at the many plants on the windowsill. Most of all, there were succulents, small, unpretentious, but surprisingly resilient. In some ways, they reminded me of myself. Rowan returned with my papers and a glass of water for me. Here, drink this. We have a lot of work to do. I gratefully accepted the water. What's next? Next, we need to get a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. I've already prepared the request. Rowan showed me a document on official letterhead. You'll need to sign it. We'll also need information on all the loan payments, who made them and when. This will help prove that you had nothing to do with the loan. I signed the request, feeling strangely relieved that I wasn't the only one who had to deal with this complicated story. Now about the house on Lakeview Terrace, Rowan continued. You said you found information about it on the internet, but we need the official real estate records. Who is it registered to? Who's the buyer on the purchase agreement? I'll file a request, but it'll take some time. How long? I asked. 5 to 7 days. Bureaucracy, Rowan shrugged. But there's a way to speed things up. I know a realtor who has access to the real estate database. He can give us preliminary information informally. I'll contact him today. What about the bank? I asked. How could they make such a large loan without checking everything thoroughly? That's a good question, Rowan nodded. Banks are obliged to conduct strict checks on the borrower's identity. But if the scammer had all your documents, including your social security number and tax returns, plus a well-forged signature, plus, if the application was submitted by someone you know well who could answer personal questions about you, banks make mistakes too. Or turn a blind eye if it's a good deal, I said. And that's possible, Rowan agreed. In any case, we'll be sure to find out if there were any irregularities in the loan. The next few days passed in anxious anticipation. Rowan was busy gathering evidence, and I tried to live a normal life, though it wasn't easy. The kids didn't call, neither Harper nor Lennox. Apparently, they decided to give me time to come to my senses. On the 4th day, Rowan called and asked me to come to her office. I have some news, she said as I entered her office. A realtor I know provided information on a house on Lakeview Terrace. Guess who it's registered to? Harper? I guessed. Not exactly. Rowan handed me a printout. It's registered to Caldwell Holdings, LLC. It's a limited liability company set up by your son-in-law, Frank Caldwell, 2 months ago, shortly before he bought the house. I frowned. Why go to all that trouble? Why not register the house directly to yourself? To hide the real owner, Rowan explained. It's a common practice when people want to hide something. In this case, I think your daughter and her husband wanted to hide the connection between the loan in your name and the purchase of the house. If the house was deeded directly to Harper, it would be too obvious where the money went. But they live in the house, right? How do they explain that? Officially, they rent the house from Caldwell Holdings. At least that's what my source said. The rent is $1,000 a month, which is well below market price for a house like this. I shook my head, amazed at my daughter's cunning. I didn't realize she was capable of such machinations. That's not all, Rowan continued. I got a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. Look at the signature. She held it out to me. There was a scrawl in the borrower's signature column that looked remotely like my signature. It doesn't even look like that, I exclaimed. How could the bank accept such an obvious forgery? Because someone at the bank helped your daughter. Rowan tapped her finger on the document. Note the name of the loan officer who processed the transaction. Tyler Pratt. Does that name ring a bell? I hesitated. No, I don't remember it. What about your daughter? I don't know. Wait a minute. I remembered the conversation at Zoe's birthday party. Lennox had mentioned someone named Tyler, someone Harper went to college with. I think they dated for a while, but I'm not sure if it's the same Tyler. It's worth checking, Rowan made a note. If the loan officer knew your daughter personally, that would explain how she managed to bypass the standard checks. Rowan pulled out another document. Here's the loan statement. 2 payments have already been made. Guess who? Harper? No, Caldwell Holdings. The money's coming out of a corporate account. Another attempt to hide the connection. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. My daughter hadn't just used my documents, she'd built a whole scheme to cover up her actions. What about Lennox? I asked. Did you find out what his role was in all this? There's no direct evidence of his involvement, Rowan replied. But judging by his reaction, as you described, he was definitely aware of his sister's machinations. The question is whether he was actively helping or just turning a blind eye. At that point, Rowan's cell phone rang. She apologized and answered it. The conversation was short, but afterward the lawyer's face brightened. Great news! St. Elizabeth's Clinic has confirmed that on March 14th, you were indeed there from 8:30 in the morning until 15:45. They kept all the records, including the time of each procedure and consultation. And the loan agreement, according to the bank's stamp, was signed at 11:20 the same day. So I couldn't physically have been at the bank at that time, I said. Exactly, Rowan nodded. It's an airtight alibi. Now we have all the evidence we need for the lawsuit. The forged signature, your alibi for the time you signed the contract, the questionable role of the loan officer, and the obvious scheme to conceal the true purpose of the loan. I remained silent, digesting the information. On the one hand, I was relieved that irrefutable evidence had been gathered. On the other, I was depressed at the thought of how carefully Harper had planned the whole thing. This wasn't an impulsive act or a moment of weakness. This was a well-thought-out scam against her own mother. Are you all right? Rowan asked, noticing my condition. Not really, I answered honestly. I just can't believe that my daughter, that she could do this to me. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, Rowan sighed, especially when it comes to elderly parents. A lot of kids start to see them not as full human beings, but as property, or a nuisance, or a source of potential inheritance. It's sad, but it's a reality. I nodded, tears welling up in my throat. You know, when Harold, my husband, died, I thought nothing worse would ever happen in my life. But this hurts even worse. Rowan silently handed me a box of tissues. I blotted my eyes, trying to pull myself together. I'm sorry. I'm not usually this emotional. Don't apologize, Rowan said softly. You have every right to feel whatever you want in a situation like this. We were silent for a while. Then Rowan asked, what do you want to do next? We have enough evidence for a civil suit. If we win, the bank will cancel the loan agreement and you won't have to pay the loan. But the house will probably be confiscated because it was bought with illegally obtained funds. And the criminal case? I asked quietly. For that, you would have to file a report with the police, Rowan replied. They will conduct their investigation, and if they find enough evidence, the case will be referred to the prosecutor's office. If your daughter is found guilty, she could face a fine and possibly probation. Real jail time is rare in these cases, especially if it's a first offense. I wondered. Did I want my daughter to have a criminal record? No, but did I want her to realize the seriousness of what she had done? Definitely yes. Could we start with the civil suit? I asked. Could we leave the criminal case open? I want to see how Harper reacts. Maybe she'll come to her senses, admit her guilt. Of course, Rowan agreed. We can take it one step at a time. First, we'll file a civil suit, and then, depending on how things develop, we'll decide whether to involve the police. Thank you. I was relieved. When can we file the suit? I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week, Rowan said. We'll file the suit in Concord District Court. After that, your daughter will receive official notice of the trial. It usually takes about a month to prepare for the first hearing. A whole month? I was surprised. That long? It's the rules of court, Rowan shrugged. But the good news is that I'll be filing a motion for interim measures. If the judge grants it, the bank will suspend all claims on the loan until the trial is over. So you won't have to worry about making payments during that period. When I left Rowan's office, the sun was shining outside, a stark contrast to my inner state. I felt devastated, as if I'd been through a serious illness. On my way home, I stopped at the small cafe where I sometimes met Audrey. I wanted to be among people, to listen to ordinary conversations, to take my mind off my heavy thoughts. I ordered tea and sat watching the customers. At the next table, a young woman was having lunch with her elderly mother. They were talking animatedly about something, laughing. The daughter was carefully adjusting her mother's scarf, listening to her with sincere interest. It was an ordinary picture, which before would not have caused me any special emotions. But now I looked at them with a pang of longing. Why had things gone wrong with Harper and me? When had we lost the closeness that should be between mother and daughter? Maybe I was a bad mother, not giving my children enough attention, demanded too much, or, conversely, too little? No, I always tried to be a good mother. Harold and I worked hard to give the children everything they needed. I read them books, helped them with their homework, and supported their hobbies. Sure, I made mistakes. All parents do. But I never betrayed my children, never lied to them, never took advantage of them. Harper betrayed me, used me, lied to me. And she didn't even think it was a big deal, judging by her reaction. Maybe it wasn't me, maybe it was her. Her character, her choices, her sense of morality. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I couldn't be held responsible for her decisions. When I got home, I found 3 messages from Harper on my answering machine. The first one demanded that I call her back immediately. In the second, she threatened serious consequences if I didn't stop this lawyer nonsense. In the third, her tone changed to pleading. Mom, please, let's talk. I'll explain everything. Don't do this, please. I didn't return the call. What else could she say? What excuses could she give? I took out a loan in your name because I wanted a better house. I forged your signature because I knew you'd say no. I hid everything from you because I didn't think it was necessary to put you on notice. No explanation could change what had happened. My daughter had betrayed my trust, broken the law, and jeopardized my financial security. And worst of all, she didn't even see the harm in it. I went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the events of the last few days in my head. All the evidence pointed to Harper acting deliberately and calculatedly. She hadn't just used my name, she'd created a scheme to cover up her actions. She registered the house with a shell company. She used her bank contacts to bypass the checks. It wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was a carefully planned fraud. And Lennox knew about it. He may not have been directly involved, but he certainly knew and approved of his sister's actions. His reaction to my call left no doubt. My own children conspired against me. They didn't see me as a person with feelings and rights, but what? An obstacle? An inconvenience? A means to their ends? How could I have not seen this before? How could I not see that my children's attitude toward me had long since crossed the line into mere disrespect? All my life I've tried to be a good mother, supporting them, helping them, making concessions. And as a result, they've decided they can use me however they want. Well, it's time to show them they were wrong. I'm not a helpless old woman to be manipulated. I'm a person who knows how to stand up for herself. I'm a mother who loved her children but won't let them trample on my dignity. Yes, I'm in pain. Yes, I feel betrayed, but that pain doesn't break me. On the contrary, it gives me strength. Strength to fight for justice. Strength to show my children that their actions have consequences. Strength to finally respect myself. I called Rowan this morning and told her I was ready to sue as soon as possible. It was time to act decisively. It had been 2 weeks since the lawsuit had been filed. Rowan warned me that Harper would receive official notice of the lawsuit in the next few days. After that, we could expect a new wave of calls and attempts to influence me. So I tried to prepare myself mentally for the coming storm. However, contrary to expectations, the phone was silent. Neither Harper nor Lennox tried to contact me. I even started to worry. Maybe something had happened to the kids? But then I decided that they were just ignoring me, hoping that I would come to my senses and withdraw the lawsuit. Thursday morning, I got a call from Audrey. She spoke quickly and excitedly. "Winnie, are you sitting down? You'd better sit down." "What's wrong?" I asked, sinking into the chair by the phone. "My granddaughter Paige, you remember her, right? She works part-time at the Silver Spoon Catering Company," Audrey began. "So she just called me and told me that their firm got the order to cater Harper's party. The housewarming party is Saturday at Lakeview Terrace." I was silent, digesting the information. Harper was throwing a housewarming party in a house bought with a loan fraudulently put in my name. And of course, she hadn't invited me. "Winnie? Are you there?" Audrey's voice brought me back to reality. "Yes, I'm here," I answered. "I'm just, thinking about what I'd heard." "That's just outrageous," Audrey exclaimed. "Having a housewarming party when there's a lawsuit pending. And not even invite your own mother. I've always said your Harper was a real piece of work, but this is out of line." "How many guests is she expecting?" I asked, surprised at my own calmness. "Paige says the reservation is for 40 people. Cocktails, appetizers, champagne, it's all top shelf. The party starts at 6 p.m. I pictured Harper walking guests through her luxurious new home, accepting congratulations, talking about the designer renovations and lake views, and not a word about how she managed to buy the property. "Thank you for letting me know, Audrey," I said. "It's important information." "What are you going to do?" Her voice sounded curious. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I'm sure I'll think of something." After talking to Audrey, I dialed Rowan's number. Luckily, she was there and answered right away. "Mrs. Tolliver, I was just about to call you," she said. "The bailiffs can't serve the notice on your daughter. She won't answer the door or answer the phone." "I think I know when and where to find her for sure," I said, and told her about the upcoming party. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you suggesting that we serve her with a subpoena right at the housewarming party?" Rowan asked. "That's unconventional." "Are there any legal obstacles?" I asked. "No, legally, there are no legal obstacles," Rowan replied. "The bailiff has the right to serve the documents wherever the defendant is, but it could cause a scandal." "Let her do it," I said firmly. "My daughter is having a party in a house she bought with illegally obtained money, and she doesn't even bother to invite me, even though the loan is in my name. I think a little scandal is the least she deserves." "All right, I'll contact the bailiff," Rowan agreed after a moment's thought. "But are you sure you want to be there in person? Wouldn't it be better to let the bailiff do the job himself?" I wondered. "Really? Why would I want to be there? To see the shock on my daughter's face? To savor her humiliation? No, that wasn't it. I wanted Harper to realize that I wasn't a helpless old woman to be used and forgotten. I'm a person who can stand up for herself. Yes, I want to be there," I said firmly. "Not out of revenge, but to show my daughter that I haven't given up and I won't." "I understand." Rowan's voice was respectful. "In that case, I'll arrange with the bailiff to meet you Saturday night near your daughter's house. Say, 5:30? "That's fine," I agreed. "Let me know the exact location closer to the date." After talking to Rowan, I felt strangely calm. The decision had been made, and now all I had to do was follow the plan. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of the situation rather than adrift. The rest of the week passed in anxious anticipation. I tried to occupy myself with everyday tasks, cleaning, reading, working in the garden. But my thoughts kept returning to Saturday. Am I doing the right thing? Is it too cruel to spoil my daughter's holiday? But every time the doubts began to gnaw at me, I remembered what Harper had done, and my resolve returned. Saturday, I woke up early. The day was clear and warm, the perfect weather for a lake party. I stood in front of my closet for a long time, wondering what to wear. In the end, I chose a dark blue dress with a white collar, austere but elegant. I styled her hair and applied light makeup. Looking in the mirror, I saw not a woman broken by grief, but a man with dignity and fortitude. At 5 o'clock, I called a cab. Usually, I used public transportation, but today was a special occasion. Besides, I didn't know how I was going to get home, and I didn't want to depend on bus schedules. Rowan had sent me the address of a cafe near Lakeview Terrace where we were to meet the bailiff. When the cab pulled up to the cafe, I saw Rowan sitting at a table on the outdoor veranda. Next to her was a tall, middle-aged man in a smart suit. Mrs. Tolliver. Rowan stood up when she saw me. I'd like you to meet Mr. Elliot Nash, the bailiff. Mr. Nash nodded politely. Good evening, ma'am. Miss Jett has explained the situation to me. I will serve notice of the lawsuit on Mrs. Caldwell in accordance with all the rules. Thank you. I shook his hand, noting the firm handshake. Here's the plan of action, Rowan said. Mr. Nash will pose as a catering employee to get into the house. Once he locates your daughter, he will hand her the papers. You can go in with him or wait outside and come in later, whichever is more convenient for you. I wondered, show up with the bailiff? Or wait until the documents were served and then go in? Which would make a stronger impression? I think it would be better if I went in with Mr. Nash, I decided. Harper should know right away that this was no accident or coincidence. Whatever you say, Rowan nodded. Just remember, your goal is not to cause a scandal, but to show that you're serious and won't back down. Try to keep your dignity, no matter what happens. I'll try, I promised, though I was trembling inside. We decided to walk. It was only a 10-minute walk from the cafe to Harper's house. On the way, Rowan explained the legal aspects of the situation to me again. Once the notice is served, your daughter will be officially considered to have been notified of the lawsuit. She will have 21 days to file an answer with the court. If she fails to do so, the court may issue an in absentia judgment in your favor. I nodded, but my thoughts were far away. I imagined walking into a house where I had never been welcomed before. I would see my daughter's face when she realized her machinations had been exposed. What would she say? How would she react? And how will I feel about it? Lakeview Terrace was exactly as I'd imagined, a row of lakeside luxury homes with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveway. Number 27 stood out even against this background, a two-story house with panoramic windows and a large terrace overlooking the lake. Several cars were already parked outside the house, and muffled music and laughter were coming from the open windows. The party's in full swing, Mr. Nash said, adjusting his tie. Perfect timing. We walked to the front door. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I tried to remain calm. Mr. Nash pressed the bell. A few seconds later, the door was opened by a young woman in a catering uniform. Are you from the Silver Spoon? She asked. We were expecting extra staff. That's right. Mr. Nash nodded confidently. I was sent to help with the service, and this lady is the quality inspector. We need to talk to the lady of the house. Sure, come on in, the girl led us inside. Mrs. Caldwell is in the living room with her guests. We entered a spacious hall with a marble floor and mirrored walls. There were vases of flowers everywhere, and a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling that must have cost a fortune. I held my breath. That's what the money from the loan in my name had been used for. Mr. Nash strode confidently toward where the voices were coming from. I followed him, trying not to betray my excitement. We entered a huge living room with panoramic windows overlooking the lake. The room was filled with people in evening gowns, glasses of champagne in their hands. In the center of the group stood Harper in an elegant beige dress, talking animatedly about something. When she saw an unfamiliar man in a suit, she stopped half-heartedly. When she saw me, her face was petrified with shock. Mom? She said incredulously. How did you get here? There was silence in the room. All eyes were on me and Mr. Nash, who stepped forward. Mrs. Harper Caldwell? He asked in an official tone. Yes, my daughter answered confusedly. And who are you? Elliot Nash, the bailiff. He pulled some papers from his inside jacket pocket. I am hereby serving you with notice of a lawsuit by Winifred Tolliver for fraud and forgery. Harper's face went pale. She stood motionless, staring at the papers held out to her. What the hell is this? Exclaimed Frank, Harper's husband, stepping forward. What kind of lawsuit? The suit concerns a $950,000 mortgage loan illegally made in Mrs. Tolliver's name, Mr. Nash explained calmly. Mrs. Caldwell, please accept the papers. Harper mechanically took the papers, still staring at me in shock. Mom, are you crazy? She hissed. Making such a spectacle of yourself in front of everyone. No, Harper. You're crazy, I said quietly but firmly. Making a loan in my name without my knowledge. Forging my signature. Buying a house with money that doesn't belong to you. The room became so quiet you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. The guests looked around in confusion. Someone began to make their way toward the exit. Mrs. Tolliver. Mr. Nash leaned slightly toward me. My mission is accomplished. I'm good to go unless you have further instructions. Thank you, Mr. Nash. I nodded. You're free to go. The bailiff bowed politely and headed for the exit. There was an awkward silence in the living room. Harper stood clutching the documents she had received and seemed unsure of what to do next. Let's keep the party going, people. Frank tried to lighten the mood. Miss, he said to the catering girl, bring more champagne, while my mother-in-law and I talk in the study. He took a step toward me, intending to take my arm, but I stepped back. No, Frank, I said. No talking in the study. Everything I have to say, I've already said in court. Now I want to see the house I bought with the loan money in my name. I have that right, don't I? Mom, stop it right now. Harper has finally regained her speech. You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. No, Harper, you're embarrassing yourself by your actions, I said calmly. I'm only telling the truth. What truth? Lennox, whom I had not noticed among the guests, intervened. What are you making up again, Mother? I didn't think of anything, Lennox. I turned to my son. Your sister made the loan in my name by forging my signature. And you knew about it, but you did nothing to stop her. That's not true, Lennox mumbled. But I could see in his eyes that I had hit the mark. Enough! Harper threw the papers on the coffee table. Mom, you get out of here right now or I'm calling the police. Call them, I said calmly. It will be interesting to explain to the officers why you throw out of the house of the person in whose name the loan for its purchase. There was a surprised whisper among the guests. Some even whistled quietly. Harper looked like she'd been punched. Ladies and gentlemen, I turned to the guests. I apologize for the scene. I didn't mean to ruin your evening, but I thought you should know that this beautiful house was purchased with fraudulent money. My daughter used my deed and forged my signature to get a loan for $950,000. And then she registered the house with the shell company to cover up her actions. That's a lie, Harper shouted. Mom, you agreed to help us with the loan. You gave me power of attorney. Did I? I raised an eyebrow. Where is that power of attorney? Why didn't you show it to the bank? Why did you have to forge my signature? And why did I only find out about the loan when I got the late payment letter? Harper was silent, pressing her lips into a thin line. Frank put his hand on her shoulder, as if trying to be supportive. Mom, let's not make a scene, he said conciliatingly. We can talk about this in peace. Tomorrow, for instance. No, Frank, I shook my head. We'd already tried to talk things over. Harper had ignored my calls. Lennox was urging me not to do anything stupid. Neither of you took the situation seriously. You thought I'd just accept it, like I always do. But not this time. I paused, circling the living room. Luxurious furniture, designer light fixtures, paintings in expensive frames. Everything screamed money, money taken by fraud. It's a beautiful house, I said. Too bad we'll have to sell it soon to pay off the loan, or the bank will seize it. I haven't decided which option I prefer. You can't do that, Harper exclaimed, taking a step toward me. This is our home. We've worked our whole lives to afford a house like this. No, Harper, I objected. You didn't work for this. You just stole money using my name, and now you're going to have to answer for it. That's when Zoe, my granddaughter, came running into the living room. She stopped when she saw the tense scene. What's going on? She asked, looking from her mother to me. Grandma, why are you here? Hi, Zoe, I smiled at her. I came to see your new house. It's beautiful. Zoe, go up to your room, Harper said sharply. Now. But Mom. Now, Harper repeated, raising her voice. Zoe gave me a puzzled look and reluctantly left the room. See what you've done? Harper turned to me. You've traumatized the child with your stupid accusations. No, Harper, I said calmly. You've traumatized your daughter by setting an example of dishonesty and disrespect for the law. What will she think when she learns the truth about how you got this house? She'll never know, Harper gritted her teeth. Because there is no truth. It's just the fiction of a senile old woman who's jealous of her own children's success. I felt anger rising inside me, but I held it back. This was not the time or place for emotional outbursts. Fiction? I shook my head. I have proof, Harper. Handwriting analysis that proves the signature was forged. Medical records proving I was at St. Elizabeth's when I signed the loan agreement. Real estate records showing that the house was registered to a shell company called Caldwell Holdings. Information about loan payments made from the company's corporate account. And the testimony of Tyler Pratt, a loan officer who admitted to helping you bypass the checks because of your past relationship. With every word I said, Harper's face grew paler and paler. I saw fear flicker in her eyes for the first time in our entire confrontation. "You're bluffing," she whispered. "Tyler would never—" "He's already testified," I lied, hoping Rowan would forgive me for this little ruse. "When given the choice between helping you and prosecuting you, he chose to save his own skin. Typical of men, isn't it?" Frank was now looking at his wife with bewilderment and suspicion. "Harper, what is she talking about? Tyler who?" "Nothing," Harper said. "She's making it up." "Then why are you pale?" Frank asked. "And why didn't you ever tell me the details of how the loan was arranged?" I saw a shadow of distrust pass between the couple. Frank may have known about his wife's machinations in general terms, but the details seemed to have been kept from him. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said again to the guests, many of whom were already feeling uncomfortable. "Again, I apologize for ruining the evening. But perhaps you should reconsider your relationship with the owners of this house. People who can deceive their own mother are unlikely to be honest with friends and coworkers." "Get out of here!" Harper shouted, losing her temper. "Get out of my house!" "Technically, it's not your house yet," I pointed out. "And it won't be when the court decides my lawsuit. But I'll leave because I've done everything I wanted to do." I turned to leave, but stopped when I saw Zoe standing in the doorway. She must have overheard our conversation, and her eyes were wide with shock. "Grandma," she whispered. "Is it true? Did Mommy take the money without your permission?" I looked at my granddaughter, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lie either. "Yes, Zoe," I said softly. "Unfortunately, it's true, but it's not your fault what your parents did." "Zoe, don't listen to her," Harper exclaimed. "Grandma's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I understand perfectly well, Harper," I said. "And your daughter, too, will soon understand everything. Children don't stay children forever. They grow up and begin to see their parents for who they really are." With those words, I headed for the exit. No one tried to stop me. I could feel the stares of the guests, surprised, sympathetic, judgmental. But I didn't care. I had done what I had to do. The story of the lawsuit and the housewarming scandal spread through Concord with the speed of wildfire. In a small town where everyone knows each other, events like this can't go unnoticed. The very next day, Audrey called me, panting with excitement. "Winnie, you won't believe it. The whole town is talking about it. Paige said the guests scattered within half an hour of you leaving, and Frank and Harper got into a terrible fight in front of the rest of the people." I listened to her story with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, there was the satisfaction that the truth had finally come out. On the other hand, there was the unpleasant residue of the thought that I had been the cause of my own daughter's public humiliation. She may have deserved it, but it's always hard for a mother to see her child suffer, even if that child is a grown woman who has committed a crime. "What about Lennox?" I asked. "Was he there until the end, too?" "According to Paige, he left right after you. Looked like he'd seen a ghost." The day after the housewarming scandal, the phone in my house was ringing off the hook. Neighbors, former colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years called. Everyone wanted to know details, to express support, or just to gossip. I answered politely, but briefly, without going into detail. This story was painful enough as it was. I didn't need to turn it into entertainment for the curious. Towards evening, Rowan called. "Mrs. Tolliver, how are you? I hope the events of yesterday didn't upset you too much." "I'm fine," I replied. I'm just tired of the calls. The whole town seems to be talking about our family's scandal. Unfortunately, it's unavoidable, Rowan sighed. But the good news is that after yesterday, your daughter finally received official notice of the lawsuit. Now she'll either have to answer in court or settle. You think she'll settle? I asked hesitantly. She probably would, especially if she hires a good lawyer. Any lawyer would advise her to avoid a trial given the amount of evidence against her. Rowan was right. 3 days later, Harper called me herself. Her voice sounded unusually subdued. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over? Sure, I said, a little surprised at her tone. Harper arrived an hour later. She looked gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. She was dressed plainly, without the usual dapper clothes, jeans, sweater, minimal makeup. When she entered the house, she paused uncertainly in the hallway, as if she didn't know where to go next. Come into the kitchen, I said. I had just made tea. We sat down at the table across from each other. Harper held the cup with both hands, as if she were warming herself against it. Mom, she began after a pause, I came to talk about the lawsuit. I guessed that, I nodded. I'm listening. I hired a lawyer, Harper said. He looked at the case file and said that, she stammered, I don't have much chance of winning. The evidence was too compelling. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He offered to settle, Harper continued, to avoid a trial and possible criminal prosecution. And what does that settlement include? I asked. I take over the loan, Harper said quickly. I put it in my own name. I pay all interest and penalties, compensate you for moral damages, $10,000. In return, you drop the lawsuit and don't file a police report. I thought about it. The proposal was reasonable from a practical point of view, but something about it made me uncomfortable. What about the house? I asked. What would happen to the house on Lakeview Terrace? Harper pressed her lips together. Frank and I decided to sell it after the scandal. After everything that's happened, we can't stay there. Plus, we need the money to pay off the loan and compensate you. I understand, I nodded. And you? Do you realize what you've done? What do you mean? Harper frowned. I want to know if you realize the seriousness of what you've done, I explained. You didn't just take the money without asking. You forged documents, defrauded the bank, jeopardized my financial security. That's a crime, Harper. I know, she said quietly. My lawyer explained to me all the possible consequences. Up to 5 years in prison, a fine of up to $250,000, a criminal record. I'm not talking about the legal consequences, I interrupted. I'm talking about the moral side. Do you realize that you betrayed my trust? That you did to me what a daughter should never do to her mother? Harper was silent, staring into her cup. Why did you do it? I asked. I really want to understand. Frank and I have long dreamed of a house on the lake, Harper began after a pause. But we didn't have enough money for a down payment. And then I found out that Tyler, a former college friend of mine, was working at Fairview National. Friend from college. He said he could help with the loan, but he needed a co-borrower with a good credit history. At first I thought about asking you, but I decided it would be easier to forge my signature. I finished for her. I knew you'd say no, Harper said with sudden bitterness. You were always so right, so careful, always saying no to any risky proposition. And I wanted this house. I wanted to show everyone that I'd made something of my life, that I wasn't just a low-paid social services inspector, but a successful woman who could afford Lakeview Terrace. And for that, you're willing to risk my home, my reputation, my future? I didn't think you'd find out, Harper said quietly. We planned to pay the loan on time, no late payments, but then Frank had some business problems and we missed a payment. And the bank sent me a notice, I nodded. That's how I found out. We didn't talk for a moment. It was starting to rain outside the window, the drops tapping on the eaves quiet, monotonous, soothing. Well, I said at last, I'll consider your settlement offer, but I'll need to consult with a lawyer. Of course, Harper nodded quickly. I understand. But Mom, please don't take this to court. It would ruin my career. I'd lose my job. And Zoe. She'd be so embarrassed in front of her friends. I looked at my daughter and I didn't see remorse. I saw fear. Fear of the consequences. not shame for what she'd done. She still didn't realize that the main problem wasn't a threat to her career or reputation, but that she had betrayed her own mother. "I'll give you an answer in a few days," I said. "I need to think it over." Harper left, leaving behind a feeling of incompleteness. I saw no genuine remorse in her, only a desire to avoid trouble, and it made me question the idea of a settlement. The next day, Lennox arrived. Unlike his sister, he was aggressive from the start. "Mom, this has gone too far. Do you realize you're destroying our family with your actions?" "I'm not destroying the family, Lennox," I said calmly. "It was you and Harper, when you decided that you could use me for your own purposes." "Oh my God, that's so melodramatic," rolled his eyes. "No one was using you. Harper just wanted a better life for her family. She always wanted a house on the lake. And she decided to get it at my expense," I said. "It's called fraud, Lennox, and you knew it, but you didn't do anything to stop your sister." Lennox paced the room nervously. "Look, I didn't know all the details, okay? Harper told me that you had a deal, that you agreed to help with the loan. And you believed it." I grinned. "After knowing me all my life, did you really believe that I agreed to take out a loan for almost $1 million?" "I don't know," Lennox shrugged. "Maybe you finally decided to do something good for your kids." His words hit me like a slap in the face. Finally decided to do something useful. As if all the years of caring, of love, of support didn't mean anything. As if I owed them something more on top of what I'd already given them. "Go away," I said quietly. "Now." "Mom, don't be so dramatic." Lennox tried to take my hand. "I just want you to withdraw the suit. Harper is already being punished. Everyone is talking. Frank is on the verge of divorce. The house will have to be sold." "Go away," I said again. "I'm not discussing this with you, especially after what you just said." Lennox wanted to object, but something in my face stopped him. He sighed and headed for the door. "You're going to regret this, Mom, when you're all alone." After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking out the window and thinking, maybe Lennox was right. Maybe I'm being too hard on Harper. After all, she is my daughter, whatever her mistakes. But then I remembered her face when she talked about the possible consequences to her career. Not a word about how her act affected me. Not a hint of understanding that she had done something irreparably wrong to her own mother. I called Rowan and told her about Harper's offer. "Legally, it's a reasonable offer," the lawyer said. "You'll be compensated and released from your loan obligations. But, of course, the decision is yours." "What happens if we go forward with the lawsuit?" I asked. "Given the evidence, the court will almost certainly rule in your favor," Rowan replied. "The bank will be obliged to cancel the loan agreement as fraudulent. And then there are two options. Either the bank goes to the police to report fraud, or it tries to recover the money from your daughter in civil proceedings." "And the house?" "The house would most likely be seized to repay the loan, as it is collateral for the loan." I wondered. Oddly enough, the prospect of losing the house worried me the least. After all, it wasn't my house. I hadn't even been in it once before that evening. More important was the question, what would Harper learn if I just agreed to a settlement? "I need to think about it," I said to Rowan. "I'll let you know what I decide." That night, I got another call from Audrey. "Winnie, have you heard the latest news? Frank's left Harper. They say he was furious when he found out about the loan. Turns out she didn't tell him everything either." I sighed. Not that I had any particular sympathy for Frank, but breaking up a family couldn't make me happy, especially since he and Harper had a daughter. "What about Zoe?" I asked. "Still living with her mother?" But word was Frank was going to ask for joint custody. The problems were multiplying like a snowball. I didn't want my granddaughter to suffer because of this story. But was it my fault what happened? Didn't Harper's actions set off this chain of events? I stayed up all night thinking about the situation. By morning, I'd decided I wasn't going to settle. Let the court hear the case and make a fair judgment. Only then will Harper truly realize the seriousness of what he's done. The trial began a month later. Harper hired an expensive lawyer from the Capitol who built a defense on the fact that I allegedly gave verbal consent to the loan. But when Rowan presented evidence, handwriting examinations, medical documents proving my alibi, testimony from bank employees. It became clear that the defense didn't stand a chance. The judge, an elderly woman with a discerning eye, listened carefully to both sides. At the end of the second session, she said, "The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Caldwell acted without her mother's consent and forged her signature on loan documents. Such acts fall within the definition of fraud and forgery. However, given the familial relationship between the plaintiff and the defendant, I suggest that the parties reconsider the possibility of a settlement." This court is adjourned for 1 week. During the recess, Harper approached me in the court hallway. She looked exhausted and depressed. "Mommy, please, let's get this over with. You see what's coming next. I could lose everything, my job, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. Think of Zoe. What would it be like for her to live with the stigma of being the daughter of a criminal?" I looked at her and I didn't see a repentant daughter, but a person who's trying to avoid responsibility for her actions to the last possible moment. Even now, she was only thinking about herself and using Zoe as a means to pressure me. "You should have thought about Zoe before you committed the crime," I said quietly. "And the example you set for your daughter with your actions." "Is that what this is about?" Harper grinned bitterly. "Are you trying to teach me a lesson, prove that mom's always right, to get revenge for all the years I disobeyed you?" "No, Harper," I shook my head. "I just want justice. And I want you to finally realize that your actions have consequences. Not just for you, but for other people." Harper looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You know what? Do whatever you want. But after this, I don't think of you as my mother anymore. And you can forget about having a granddaughter." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the empty hallway with a heavy heart. Her words hurt deeply, but didn't shake my resolve. If that was the price of justice, I was willing to pay it. A week later, the court ruled in my favor. The loan agreement was declared null and void, and the bank was ordered to cancel all my obligations under it. Harper had to pay me compensation in the amount of $20,000 for moral damages. The judge also noted that the bank had the right to apply to law enforcement agencies on the fact of fraud, but this decision was left to the discretion of the financial institution. After the ruling was announced, Harper walked past me without saying a word or looking in my direction. Lennox, who was sitting in the courtroom, also defiantly turned away. I was alone, except for Rowan and Audrey, who had supported me throughout the trial. "You won, Mrs. Tolliver," Rowan said, shaking my hand. "Justice has been served." "Yes," I nodded. "But at what cost?" "Sometimes there's a price to pay for the truth," Rowan said philosophically. "The question is whether it's worth the price." I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer to that question at that moment. The consequences of the lawsuit were not long in coming. The bank didn't go to the police, preferring to settle the matter amicably. They seized the house on Lakeview Terrace to pay off the loan. Harper and Zoe had to move into a small apartment in another part of town. Frank filed for divorce, seeking joint custody of their daughter. Lennox stopped returning my calls. His wife Deirdre, with whom I've always had a cool relationship, called one day to let me know they didn't want me in contact with their children. "They're too impressionable for family dramas," she said. I found myself isolated. The children and grandchildren, who had been less than eager to socialize with me before, had now completely severed relations. I became a pariah in my own family. Strangely, I didn't feel as bitter as I had expected. Was I in pain? Of course. I lost my children and grandchildren, perhaps forever. But at the same time, I gained something equally important: self-respect and freedom from the toxic relationships that had been eating away at my soul for years. Audrey became my biggest support during this period. She stopped by almost every day, bringing fresh baked goods, telling me the city news, just being there for me. She was the one who suggested that I start a new chapter in my life. "Winnie, how many years have you been living for others?" she asked me one day over a cup of tea. "First for my husband, then for my children. And when was the last time you did something just for yourself?" "Something you dreamed of but put off until later?" I wondered. "Really, when? Maybe before I had kids? Or even before marriage?" "You see," Audrey exclaimed, noticing my confusion. "It's time to fix this. You're free, you have a small savings, plus the compensation from the court. What would you like to do? Where would you like to go? What would you like to learn?" "I don't know," I was confused. It's been so long since I've thought about my own desires. Then let's start small, Audrey said firmly. I signed us up for computer classes at the community center, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It starts next Tuesday. Computer literacy? I was surprised. Why? Because the world doesn't stand still, and neither should we, Audrey smiled. Besides, it'll be fun. Imagine us laughing at each other's clumsy attempts to master these modern things. I agreed, though with some hesitation. I thought it was too late to learn new things at my age. But Audrey was adamant, and she was right. The course turned out to be exactly what I needed, not so much because of the knowledge I gained, although I did learn a lot, but because of the atmosphere. There were people my age, with similar problems and interests, people who didn't look at me as a burden or a source of potential inheritance, people with whom I could socialize as an equal. About a month into the course, I got a call from Rowan. Mrs. Tolliver, I have news for you. Fairview National Bank is offering you an additional $15,000 for moral damages. They have admitted that their employee Tyler Pratt violated their screening procedures when making the loan, and they want to avoid further proceedings. Well, that's fair enough, I said. If the bank had been more vigilant, none of this would have happened. Quite right, Rowan agreed. I'll prepare all the necessary documents. How are you, by the way? Surprisingly well, I said honestly. Of course, I miss spending time with my grandchildren, but otherwise, I feel freer than I have in years. I'm glad to hear that. Rowan sounded genuinely pleased. You know, I've seen a lot of cases like this, and often people, even if they win in court, feel like they've lost because of a broken relationship. But you seem to have found something positive in this situation. Yeah, I guess so, I agreed. I realized that I can live for myself, not just for my children, and that my value as a human being does not depend on their attitude towards me. Having received additional compensation from the bank, for the first time in my life, I was the owner of a rather large sum of money, which I could dispose of at my own discretion. Before, all my savings were either spent on my family's needs or saved for a rainy day. Now I could afford something I had long dreamed of, but never dared to do. You should go on a trip, Audrey urged me. Remember when you always wanted to see Italy? That was a long time ago, I smiled. Even before the kids were born. Harold promised we'd go there for our silver wedding, but then my health problems started and I didn't have time to travel. So make up for lost time, Audrey winked. Imagine, Venice, gondolas, narrow streets, cafes on Piazza San Marco. Would you come with me? I asked suddenly. Audrey froze with a cup to her lips. Me? But I thought you'd want to go alone. Why would I want to go alone? I shook my head. It would be more fun with two people. Besides, you've always been braver than me. If I get confused, you know exactly what to do. Audrey smiled. You know, I've never been to Europe. I've always wanted to, but I've always had children, grandchildren, and commitments. Yes, Winnie, I'll go. Good, I said.